Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening is Adam White. Well, never say that French football can't surprise you, because what a weekend we have had. But before diving into that and some international news as well, here are your latest headlines. Dijon got things going on Friday night as they came from behind to eventually beat Bordeaux 3-2, with Wesley Saïd scoring in the final few minutes for their fifth win in their last seven, which certainly cuts the mustard. In Saturday's early game, Strasbourg ended Paris Saint-Germain's undefeated streak with a 2-1 victory at the Stade de la Ménil. The Parisians arrested Edinson Cavani and Marco Verratti, but a wonderful strike from Stefan Bahoken, formerly of St. Mirren, earned the promoted side a valuable 3 points. In the multiplex, Monaco addressed their recent slide with a 1-0 win over Angers, thanks to a Radamel Falcao goal, his first since late October, while Rennes cut short Amiens' 7-match unbeaten run with a 2-0 win at Rojan Park. Lille earned their first back-to-back wins this season by beating Toulouse 1-0. Guingamp defeated Troyes by the same scoreline for their first victory since mid-October, as a Balotelli-inspired Nice put down lowly Metz down 3-1, who are still rooted to the bottom of the table. On Sunday, Nantes earned a 1-1 draw against Saint-Etienne, with Julien Sablé still awaiting his first win as the new Les Verts manager, as Claudio Ranieri took great exception to a challenge on Valentin Rongier, remonstrating with the official in the tunnel after the game. Lyon got back to winning ways with a tough 2-1 victory in Caen, thanks to strikes from Maxwell Cornet and Mariano Diaz, winning despite Ivan Santini's strike late on. In the final game of the weekend, Marseille just about earned a 1-1 draw at Montpellier. The hosts went in front thanks to Giovanni Ciel before a very controversial penalty allowed Florian Thauvin to equal proceedings. Michel Dixakarin's men were also denied a late winner as it was ruled out for offside. In other news, France are in Group C alongside Denmark, Australia, and Peru for the tournament in Russia this summer at the World Cup, with potential opponents in the quarterfinals possibly being Portugal or Spain, or maybe even Argentina in their group before that, should results end up a certain way. And that's all for the news. But remember, to stay up to date with all your French football news, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this week with the real surprise of the weekend, and PSG's unbeaten run has come to an end thanks to Strasbourg, who were absolutely excellent on Saturday afternoon. Adam, it's difficult to say that anyone saw this coming. I don't think anyone thought that a side that 2 years ago were in the third division of French football are beating probably the most illustrious team, not even just in France, but possibly one of the most illustrious teams in Europe at the moment.
Yeah, it was incredible, really. It was a great game. First of all, I think it's really just sort of fly in the face of the opinion that Ligue perhaps is a bit of a one-team league, and that's obviously something that's understandable given the way the league has panned out in recent years. Not last year, of course. Obviously, that's obviously a huge caveat to that too. But it shows that teams lower down the table can, given the right circumstances, can really compete with the big sides. As we've seen other teams do this season as well. You know, Montpellier, who took more points off the top four yesterday against Marseille. So that, you know, there are strong teams further down the league, perhaps a little bit less, you know, well renowned, but they're capable of causing upsets. And I think it was a bit of a perfect storm for Strasbourg on Saturday afternoon. They have a brilliant atmosphere, don't they? Their fans are really, really fantastic, and a credit to the league. And they've been sorely missed, having been down, as you mentioned, in National and Ligue 2, getting consecutive promotions, of course. And they were really brilliant. It kind of felt going into the game with PSG sort of perhaps one eye on the Bayern Munich game. You know, they've got that big lead, 10 points at the time anyway, going into the weekend. That it felt like that, you know, it was possible that Strasbourg could get something from this game. Obviously, no one really thought they would win it, but I felt watching the game at Radar Towers that there was sort of something there for Strasbourg. If they could, get the crowd behind them, get at PSG, put them under pressure in a game where no one really wants to, for PSG's point of view, no one wants to get really injured, or no one wants to give too much away, given they've got that Bayern game, which, although is a little bit of a misnomer in that it's a really important game, I think for PSG it's an important game. They really want to make sure they win their group, and that's huge, and that's their only real objective between now and the first knockout stage of the Champions League, given the lead in the league. So, the way that Strasbourg sort of really were aggressive in their pressing and defending, and they really did look really very well organised, and they deserved their win, I think, after over a sort of a certain period of the game. I felt like although they took their one chance, PSG didn't really create too many clear chances. 1-1 was sort of a fair half-time score, I felt, at least. And obviously, PSG were pressured in the second half, but they took that chance brilliantly. That Verhoeven goal was fantastic, and they didn't really create that many chances in response, did they, PSG? I felt like Strasbourg, although obviously had backs against the wall for a long period, they deserved at least something from the game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that they've possibly taken a great amount of hope. I mean, we've seen sides simply just set up to completely defend, and we've seen that some success for Metz at some part of the season, although obviously it ended very badly when they had a man sent off. You've seen Montpellier try that, and it worked for a 0-0 draw. But I think they took a couple of cliff notes, at least from Troyes' performance in midweek, really, taking the fact that the away side wasn't afraid to attack them when they needed to encounter, that they kept the ball a lot better than some of the other sides that have tried to defend against them, restrict PSG as much as you can in terms of having possession, because that's where their greatest strength lies. They have great attacking players. But yeah, you're right. I mean, it took them about until the 89th minute when they did swap keepers from Kamara to Okidja. It took another good 15 minutes before he had a strike on goal, but I thought they were excellent. Really, they showed, like you said, the pressing was excellent. I thought when they could try and get forward or try and get the ball, they did that. I thought that they sort of gifted the opener, really, in all honesty. The defending for the free kick is abysmal. It's playground stuff, really. You play to the whistle, you follow your man, and they all just stepped up and allowed Nuno da Costa the sort of freedom of Strasbourg, really, to head that one in. And it was a relatively simple goal. And the second one is a relatively simple goal. I mean, it's the classic sort of English style goal, you might even say. It was a big punt upfield, flicked on by someone in the attacking sense, and it goes on to the I don't know if they'll quite call him a legend at St Mirren, given he only played 5 games for them. But Stefan Verhoeven scores a wonderful goal, really. That I can't really blame Alphonse Areola for. Really, it's possibly where he maybe can save it, but it's gone past him before he's even reacted. But I don't know what you thought about this, Adam. Obviously, they rested a couple of players for that midweek game, but again, it promotes to why they would do that, given that they're probably still going to finish top of that group. And do they really need to make a statement at the Allianz Arena? I'm not so certain. But I think this really underlined the importance of Edinson Cavani, who did come on for the sort of last 15 minutes or so, but he was sort of starved of service anyway. But he almost nicked that goal with a header that Okudja had to knock over the top in the last few minutes. He almost made an impact, and they just lack a cutting edge without him, or at least, if not a cutting edge, a finisher.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a really interesting point. When you feel like there's so much attacking potential in this team, and then without their central striker, they sort of become a little bit blunt. I think that's an interesting point, almost in reflection of Mbappe more than Cavani, because there was a period in the Monaco game where Mbappe was sort of, I think it was almost Cavani's decision, where Cavani said, "You go play out front for a bit, I'll play on the right." And, you give him sort of run out in that position, because he's obviously been moved out wide. And Cavani knows the pain of being moved out wide as a central striker. So, it almost felt like he took pity on him a little bit. They've been playing very well on occasion. Obviously, he's been very up and down, but he's, done well in that role. He's proved he can play there at least, and perhaps more effectively than Cavani can play out wide. And yeah, it felt like without him, Mbappe, he scored the goal, obviously, but he didn't offer the focal point that Cavani does offer when he plays through the middle. And he doesn't offer necessarily the goal threat, which sounds weird given the fact that Mbappe scored so many goals last season. But this season, his finishing hasn't been, as we've mentioned many times, it's been very wayward at times. I mean, the game in Monaco, even though he was given that spell through the middle, it could have been 6 or 7-1 that game. And he missed a hat-trick of real chances. Went one-on-ones, virtually, all 3 of them. And it's really difficult to work out what the issue is, because if Cavani is rested, and you expect that to happen over the course of the season, because Mbappe is going to want time for the middle, and Emery's going to want to give him that time, and he's going to need it to develop. He's obviously still only 18. He's still a very young chap, and he's got a long way to go in his career. He's going to need time to play in what I think is his natural position, and what he thinks, I would imagine, is his natural position too. So you would hope that when they make that switch, from Emery's point of view, that it doesn't affect their goal scoring potential. But it seems to perhaps be the case. So I think it's almost that, yes, Cavani, they missed him, but Mbappe didn't really step up. And I'm not entirely sure that a solitary striking role for him is the way to go anyways. And it's kind of the way he broke for Monaco. He's playing off Falcao, he's playing with Falcao in that 4-4-2. He's got a lot of support from Bernardo Silva and Thomas Lemar. And at PSG, although, yes, and the wide players, Di Maria and obviously Neymar, and on this occasion, play very high at the pitch. They don't necessarily play very close to the striker at all times. And Cavani he's very good at sort of leading the line, and that's something that Mbappe hasn't had to do necessarily, because he always had Falcao in support. So I think it's going to be an interesting learning experience for this season for Mbappe. There's no doubt how unbelievably talented he is, and what a fantastic player he is and will be and continue to be. But he's going to need to learn to play that central striker role on his own, without support, with perhaps limited chances to drop deep and pick up the ball and run at players like he likes to do. So yes, I think there's a case for saying that without Cavani, they do lack a little bit of cutting edge. Obviously, there's fantastic amounts of attacking talent, so it's obviously there are caveats to that. But it's also a learning experience for the players that replace Cavani, and most of all Mbappe.
And you want to think as well that Mbappe probably operates the best in space, but with the ball at his feet, whether that's in front of the defence or behind the defence. He has to get up to speed. That's where his threat comes from. That's where defenders get nervous, and he starts being able to cut inside or go out wide. It just seems that as a central striker, he's not got enough support around him to try and do that, to try and maybe lay off a pass if he needs to go in behind, or try and do something like that. I mean, Draxler was maybe a little bit deep in this game for me, a little bit. He sort of struggled to support him, but I was also really disappointed by Angel Di Maria. I mean, This is it his second start of the season? I think it was this game. So it's
he started incredible. 2 in a row, didn't he?
Yeah,
he started the Strasbourg game and the Troyes game, and then he started against Nantes as well. So he's had a few, and he started against Nice too, I think, and Dijon. So he's had a few, but he's been in and out, hasn't he?
But he's never really fully proven that he deserves anything more than that at the moment, to be sort of the secondary man that they try and rely on. And I mean, he had 2 or 3 decent chances in this one, and he just sort of half-heartedly stroked both of them. I mean, one of them was pretty comfortably wide. The other was a pretty tame shot, really, that Kamara was pretty easy to deal with. And he's not... I think he's possibly motivated by moving elsewhere. I know there was a lot of rumours about the Barcelona move and bits like that in the summer, that obviously they were looking for an extra wide player to join their ranks, and he was linked heavily. Maybe he's probably looking for a way out now. He's not a guaranteed starter. It seems like we're in another Di Maria dip. It seems like we get 6 months of a good Di Maria and 6 months of an awful Di Maria, and he's just again not. It was very much similar to the second 6 months of his first season, where he just went missing. He just doesn't contribute enough if he's not got the ball at his feet, and then when he has at the moment, he's not really doing anything. I mean, I know he's come on in some games and he hasn't started an enormous amount, but he's only scored 1 goal this season. And you listed off the sides there, and none of them are in the top half. No. None of them have been particularly strong defensively, and he's not done anything. He's not created anything. He's not scoring anything. And honestly, I don't see the use for him. I would rather see, if he was available, Lucas might have been a better option, or try Giovanni Lo Celso out in the wider position, maybe. I mean, you start looking around at the fact that they've let Gonzalo Guedes go out on loan, and he's pulling up trees in Spain.
Isn't he?
Yeah. Then you look back at Di Maria, and he cost almost 3 times as much as he did, and is doing nothing at all, really. But just quickly coming back to Strasbourg, really, and talking about how excellent they've been, not just today, but the weekend. Sorry, the way they've been over the last couple of weeks, really. I mean, I think that Marseille game was really the catalyst, really. I mean, they lost quite a few before then. I know they had that win against Lille, but it felt like they were starting to understand what kind of team they were in that 3-3 draw, where they were really unlucky, really, not to nick that one as well. Since then, they've only lost that once against Twan, which was a bit of a blip, and they're slowly dragging themselves away from the drop zone. And I mean, with games against Bordeaux, Toulouse, and Metz coming up before the winter break, there's a real chance for them to keep this going, isn't there, Adam?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I would definitely say so. I was, like I said, I was really impressed with them, and I think they're a side that can be competitive in this league, and they're also a side that will think that there are several sides worse than them, and that with the relegation playoff especially, they are 100% fancy their chances of staying up. I mean, they didn't make a vast amount of signings. There are a few defensive ones. Obviously, Folloquin and Kone came in at the back, and Benjamin Cornier's obviously he's always injured, but he's injured again. Came in along with Jonas Martin, but there weren't. There are the base of the team is the same team that got sort of promoted last season, at least in midfield, and some of those players have really, really stood out. And I was especially impressed with Dimitri Leonard on Saturday. He was absolutely fantastic, and I think they had this slightly different style that perhaps the rest of the league, one, isn't used to playing against, and two, their style is effective against other teams in that sort of diamond 4-4-2 they like to play. They didn't necessarily play that at the weekend. They played sort of a 4-3-3, but they have a sort of a quick, sort of very intense kind of style when they on the counter, and they've got a lot of ball playing sort of midfielders and forwards who can hurt you given the opportunity. And he's sort of gone a little bit under the radar, but I really like Nuno da Costa. I think he looks like a good centre forward. I think he can sort of lead the line pretty well. And he's good for the odd goal. He was good against Nice when they won at Nice, played really well there. I think he got 2 in that game. And he was really good here again. He scored the first goal and set up Hokens with that flick on. So I think he's a really sort of effective striker, and he's a good focal point for players like Martin and Linar and Terrier, who's done really well this season. Another player I'm surprised Lyon let go out on loan. And they look like a side that can, given the opportunity with that crowd at home behind them, then they can really cause certain teams problems. And you're right, they've sort of figured out the right way to play, and the way that what they're good at, I think, is probably the best way to phrase it. They know what they're good at, and they stick to it, and they can damage teams by playing that way. So I think they're a credit to the league, and they're a big team as well. When you think historically, they're definitely in Ligue 1 in terms of historic sort of big clubs. It's a debate I have quite often about English teams, but I think Strasbourg would make the Ligue 1 of historic big teams with the crowd and their history. So I think they're a great addition to the league and an interesting side to watch.
Yeah, there's some great quotes from Leonard after that game, really, with his war of words, shall we say, with Neymar, who the Brazilian accusing the Strasbourg man of diving, and him sort of saying, how dare you? And the quote I like is, when you dance in front of me, I want to hurt you. That's great words from a man that sort of rose through the ranks with Strasbourg as well, was with them when they were still in the National as well, and has been really good this season. I think he scored the excellent goal against Lille, didn't he, as early this season as well, that one from distance as well. Yes, he did. I remember that. Yeah. He's had a good solid little season, and it's good to see players like that who have come all the way through the ranks. I'm thinking of players like I'm reminded of sort of like Leon Britton, who was at Swansea as well when they came all the way through the ranks as well. It's great to see another player when they do stick to those kind of sides, when they do rapidly rise, that he's not out of his depth in those further divisions. And hopefully, like you say, if Strasbourg can start building results off of this and the recent results they've got a fantastic stadium and following. I mean, both that game and the Marseille game, they were absolutely fabulous all the way through. That's exactly the kind of support we would love to see stay in Ligue 1. But another feisty game, and one that, well, the roof could have gone off of it at the very end, at least anyway. It was on Sunday's match between Montpellier and Marseille, and the one who really grabbed the headlines, unfortunately, Adam, in this one is the referee, who some would say had an okay game. I would say had a pretty disastrous game for both sides, really, in fairness. I mean, we'll come through half the stuff in a moment, but we'll start with that penalty decision because it is the big one. That's never a penalty, is it?
No, it's not. No, I was amazed that it was given. It's Hilton, isn't it? He sort of for people that haven't seen it, there's a sort of a cross comes in, and Sanson in the penalty area turns and shoots a bit of a snapshot, and Hilton's about 2 meters away, and he's got his arm across his stomach, and the ball hits his arm, which is on his stomach, and he's clearly tried to move it out of the way of the ball. There's nothing he can do about it, and to give it as a handball when it really made no difference to the situation or the play or anything. It was no wonder Montpellier were upset. But yeah, it was never a penalty. And Florian Thauvin obviously sort of stuck it away. Goalkeeper came very close to saving it too. But I'm amazed. I just got. I'm trying to think what his rationale is for giving the penalty. Is it because he feels like the arm moved towards the ball, or does he feel like he somehow affected the play? I'm honestly not sure why it was given.
I agree. I mean, the only thing you can think of is that it's hit his arm, so therefore he's given a penalty. I mean,
Yeah.
it's not denying the ball from going anywhere, because if it doesn't hit his arm, it hits him. Even if his arm was in front of him, it doesn't hit anyone else but his own body anyway. It's still in the same trajectory. I cannot for the life of me think of it other than he saw it hit an arm and gave it. I mean, there were moments in this one where it seemed like from the first couple of minutes, he seemed to lose control, in my opinion, really. I think he gave a booking in the 3rd minute, I think it was, very, very early on, and he never stopped giving away bookings. I mean, there was a great quote on Twitter from the excellent Frenchman Philou, who does a lot of sort of gifs of French football and bits like that. He mentioned that if he was in that the Lyon game that we'll come up to later, where Marcel pushed a linesman, he would have imprisoned him, which is an excellent line of how the referee sort of managed this game. And he was just throwing yellow cards out like they were candy at a store. It was just irrepressible how many. I mean, he gave away 6 bookings, which doesn't sound insane, but he booked someone in the first 2 minutes. No one dared to put a foot wrong for the rest of the game. Stéphane Sessegnon got a booking for back chatting a little bit too much, but he seemed so incensed that it was odd. I mean, Payet was booked for not too much as well. There was a couple of free kicks here and there, and the final decision, and in all honesty, at least he's got this one right, to be fair, to some degree anyway, but it's that final goal where it's swinging, and it's about the 88th minute. The corner, the free kick, on the left-hand side, it's swung in, and Souleymane Karamara heads it in. Hilton sort of dives absolutely full pelt at it and misses it, and Mandanda, in a very, shall we say, abrasive way, goes to the linesman and tries to suggest his claim. Now, what I want to talk about is they did come to the correct decision, really. Hilton is probably more than likely interfering with playing Mandanda's dive, but did it feel like the Marseille players were influencing the referee's decision? The amount of them, literally every single player on the field was around that linesman and the referee as they were trying to make the decision. Do you think that they influenced that one in any way?
Possibly. I don't. It's one of those ones that's very difficult to judge, because there was quite a long gap, wasn't there, after the goal had gone in, and they were celebrating. I think the ref may even have given it. I'm not 100% sure, as in like sort of motion to go back to the centre circle, and then the camera kind of pans away, and then all the most of the Marseille team, Mandanda included, and a number of players joining him are over to the assistant saying protesting for offside, and then the discussion is had I feel like anyway the discussion is had as a result of that protesting. But then I suppose there are 2 points to that. One, yeah, they could have quite easily have influenced the decision, and without the protesting and without the very sort of aggressive way they went about it, they might not have got the decision. But then you could argue quite easily that the decision is the correct one. I think Hilton, it's a very grey area, and it's one that comes up quite a lot with this sort of a shot that comes in, and there's a player who's sort of in roughly the path of the ball but doesn't make contact, and then it ends up in the net. How much interfering is that, and does it in certain situations, does it define as interfering or not? And with at least that the decision, given that it's still controversial, but at least the right decision was still arrived at. It felt like. So there are sort of 2 points to that sort of story, but I do feel like that in a sort of a general point of view, it's not necessarily ever going to happen, but there could be sort of ramifications for them protesting so aggressively, and so it was almost like that. It wasn't quite as bad, and maybe I'm exaggerating it, but that sort of famous Roy Keane situation with the referee at Old Trafford. It was they sort of it wasn't the same, but it brought that to mind, and that's obviously something that needs to not be prevalent in French or any sort of football. So that they could face ramifications, but at least the right decision was arrived at.
I think a couple of things at this, and Marseille fans probably plug your ears now because you're not going to like what I'm saying. To be fair, I would suggest two things. I think that one, I think they're protesting because they think Hilton's taken a nick on the ball, never mind interfered with it. I don't think they've gone up to the referee and gone, he's interfered with play. I think they've gone, he's got a nudge on that, he's got a little bit of a touch on that, that's gone in off of him, that's offside. I think that's what they've said, and fair enough. He's very close to it, to be fair, but also I would suggest, as we've seen a lot of these kind of goals in the past, I don't think the goalkeeper is changing his trajectory simply because Hilton's in there. I think this is an example of sometimes what you see in these in-swinging free kicks that obviously takes a flick anyway, but he's so nervous about any kind of contact happening beforehand, they do a late dive. So I don't think Mandanda changes his mind simply because Hilton's running in there. I think he's already rooted because of the style of the header, curling it further away from him, and he can't really make his ground up. Now, they've arrived at the right decision, but at the same time, there's little nit bits here and there. But regardless of that, and regardless of the refereeing performance, it was a lovely, entertaining game where both sides really tried to go for bits. And I want to focus on Montpellier first. They were much more attacking than we've seen them really in a couple of weeks. I know we've all lauded how good they've been defensively in taking draws from these sides higher up, and this is their fourth draw against the top four this season, which is a fantastic result, really. And they could have nicked it in the last moment. There was the free header in the last second. I think that's the moment where I was suggesting the Mousson would have gone absolutely crazy if that went in. You could hear the noise that he missed that sort of had the earth shatter a little bit anyway. But they were really, really entertaining stuff. I mean, we looked at Roussillon going down the left wing was excellent. Sessegnon was linking play. I mean, I'd even give credit to Giovanni Sio. He looked good as well, which seems like he's under a career renaissance there. They were really good.
Yeah, they were good. And it's an interesting one, but it's an interesting one because it is a bit of a departure from what Montpellier have how they've played this season, and from Michel de Zakarian's sort of general outlook in terms of the way he sets up his teams. And maybe they just felt like there was something to be had in this game with Marseille very the most probably, as well as Nice as well. They've played the most games in Ligue in terms of their European exploits have kind of added a lot to their season. They've had to rotate quite a lot, so maybe they felt like by putting under pressure that they would force mistakes, and it proved really effective. And I think they have the makings of a very, very effective side, and they could be a strong top half team this season going into the latter part of the year as well. Because although they do like to sit back and they'll play this five at the back, and that can easily become a flat back five. You look at the fullbacks, especially in Roussillon, who's been very, very good for quite a long time now, I think. Certainly for the last sort of 2 seasons at least, he's been very effective, and you could argue even he's one of their most effective players. And him and Aguiar on fullback can really fly forward, and they've got pace in Benza as well. And Sesson's tricky, and Shaqiri and Paul Lam do a very, very effective job in midfield. The kind of the kind of jacks of all trades. They can protect the back four. They can keep the ball relatively well. So they're sort of evolving into quite an effective team, and perhaps this is the way De Zakarian's kind of gone about his setting up of the team, because he knows that at Nantes they were sort of lowest scorers and second lowest scorers to Troyes in the 2 seasons that he was there in Ligue and struggled to score goals, and it was a huge criticism for his team over that period. And I think he knows that he's going to have to improve upon that. And it obviously, didn't really work out at Reims in Ligue 2, and they finished, I think, 6th or 7th perhaps last season, and didn't really come close to promotion. But he knows that he needs to improve upon that. So he set up this defensive base, and I think now he's looking at ways in which they can, be a little bit more expansive and look for those opportunities to score the goals that would make them a bit more of a worrying proposition for teams lower down the league, apart from this counter-attacking, difficult to play against unit that they are at the moment. So it's interesting to see how it'll progress, and hopefully it'll prove good, because I like him as a coach. I actually met him. He's quite an imposing chap, De Zakarian, and I hope that it goes well for Montpellier, because they're another team that we sort of like to have around the league, and they're quite a good club to they represent the league well, and it would be good to see them have a good season after some terrible seasons recently.
Yeah, I mean, we were worried about them, especially near the start of the season, but they've really come on strong recently, and that's down to a great team ethic and some excellent players like Roussillon, and I really liked Mukiele last night as well. I think he's transitioned into that back three quite nicely as well with Mendes and Hilton, and with that 40-year-old next to him guiding him a little bit more. I think he could be a fabulous player, whether he's at right back or centre back in the future as well. But talking about the side that they faced, really, Marseille, again, it was another one of those performances from this team this season that have kind of flattered to deceive. They've not really created anything. Again, big players went missing. I mean, Tovan didn't have the greatest of games. Why he came off before Dimitri Payet, though, I'll have no idea at all, because Payet was completely ineffectual. Germain was trying at times, like he was trying so hard to get himself involved and get himself into the game and get on the ball, but he didn't really have support. Sanson, this was maybe his worst game of the season as well. He really struggled. That midfield entirely really struggled to get him in part of the game. I think the only player that can really say he had a good game was Jordan Amavi, who was really good down the left and trying to add some adventure to them and passing Aguilar and Mukiele when he had the chance as well. But again, you just feel like this team isn't... If they finish in the Champions League places, they still need serious investment to be a contender for next season and the season after that in those kind of positions. And even to, be competitive in the Champions League, because at the moment they're still not quite there. I mean, look at the subs. I mean, Campos was pretty good, in fairness to him. He tried something. Bunassar didn't really have the time. Mitroglou, again, was complete. I'd forgotten he'd come on, really, in all honesty. I mean, he might have well puts anyone on with a big mask, I think, at the moment for Mitroglou. But again, they just sort of stuck in the background, and they're not really, again, they finally seized second place at the weekend, and then they've quite as quickly sort of handed it back. Oh, yes, it's on level points now, but their goal difference is vastly worse than Monaco and Lyon. But let's have a talk now really about some more games really in Ligue 1, and we'll grab a few really because it was a great weekend really. And I know the one that both of us watched on Friday night was an entertaining one as Dijon came from behind to beat Bordeaux. And this Dijon side at the moment are just incapable. They're irrepressible. They sort of come from nowhere and they will battle you until the end of the game playing attractive attacking football. And they, again, nicked one.
Yeah, they did. They've been really good. They're in the top half now. And it's really interesting to see that, as I mentioned on a previous pod, they're the top scorers outside of top four in Ligue 1. And they have the worst defensive record apart from Metz as well. So if you want goals, then, Dijon is the place to go. But you're right. I think, as Eric's mentioned a number of times before, Olivier Delalio's, often sort of tries to get his teams to play, expansive attacking football. And that's a rarity in some regards anyway, in Ligue 1, especially in the bottom half. And although they might not be sort of European contenders necessarily, and they might not necessarily, sustain this form, I feel like they're a really refreshing presence in Ligue 1, and they're a really exciting team to watch. And they're kind of one of those teams that perhaps some European leagues, we've seen the Premier League as well, sort of teams that come up, or I know they came up the season before last now, but they should have come up and they play exciting football, and they cause some upsets, and they might only finish on the 13th or 14th, but they're a genuine attraction of the league, and I think that's kind of the role Dijon are filling at the moment. And it's very consistent in that mid-table, and obviously they've got the ability to perhaps push on, but it would be interesting to see how it pans out for the season. But I feel like they're just entertainers at the moment to some extent. And I really want to highlight one player in particular, and I'm not sure if he's come up too much on the pod before, but Chang Hoon Kwon has been absolutely brilliant for them in recent weeks. The sort of South Korean, he's playing on the right mostly at the moment, but sort of forward attacking midfielder, and he's so skillful and plays with such intensity, and he's so difficult to mark and pin down. He's got an absolutely brilliant goal against Amiens. They actually lost that game 2-1, which was another really, really exciting game. I think possibly in midweek, maybe last weekend. Now there's so many games. This has caught up with me, but he was absolutely brilliant in that game, and was again at the weekend. And he's such a threat. And I think that he sort of has this really good sort of, not to say partnership because there's more than one, but they're sort of attacking players. They sort of play really well off Tavares, who's sort of like done fine without Louis Diony, who's sort of gone on to Saint-Etienne. And is fitting in really well by not scoring any goals at Saint-Etienne as a striker, which is pretty standard. But Tavares has, continued to be that focal point for second, and Kwan and Sviti when he's fit, and Saeed was really good at scored the winner against Bordeaux. They've got some really exciting players, haven't they, in those attacking areas, and they just look like they're going to score goals in every game.
Yeah, I'll take some credit for mentioning Quan a few times the last couple
Oh,
of
top
weeks
work,
because
brilliant.
I think he's brilliant as well. To be fair, he's got a little bit of everything, hasn't he? He
Mm,
sort of doesn't look like he's going to be up to much, and then he gets the ball and he tries to do something. And what I really love is his work rate and his endeavour. He just wants to get involved with the game. He wants to make something happen. He wants to bring his teammates in. He wants to be an influence. He wants to. He's almost a bit like a kid on a playground, really. At times,
mm.
it's almost like he's going, "Give me the ball. Let me see what I can do with it." I'm not going to do something individually brilliant because I don't think his technical level is that high. But he's always wanting to try and do something. His effort is amazing, and it's really inspiring. This Dijon team and the players around him, like the couple you've mentioned. I mean, Xhaka as well has been a really excellent signing on
Yeah,
that.
he's a good player.
Why Lille have allowed him to be? I mean, he had 2 nice assists this week as well, which is great for his stats. But he's been really quality so far this season for Dijon in that middle of the park, which was an area really that was the problem last season. They had a poor defense. They didn't have a link in the middle. They had interesting attackers, and having him and when he's fit, Sleety there, and they've got Abied on the bench as well. And then, like you mentioned, the rehabilitation of Wesley Said really from his time at Rennes has really been excellent. In the last couple of weeks, he's been really good and scored some really important goals. And he's now starting to start games as well because he was coming off the bench initially, but he's linking up play nicely. He's built a nice little partnership with Tavares, who's still scoring goals, even though Dioni's not there anymore. I think they're a really interesting side. Jano's a good player. You just look through this team and they're just solid players. Now they've got a better defence. I mean, I also have to give credit to Delalio because the substitutions he made to bring on Rosier in particular for Shafiq at right back just gave them a bit of energy and just gave them a little bit extra. And it was with about 10 minutes to go. Shafiq looked a little bit tired, but Rosier has been good all season, and bringing him on just to add that bit of pace and that bit of quality just added something to them. And really, again, Bordeaux had some moments that were okay, but Malcolm scores an absolutely stunning goal as well. To be fair,
Yeah.
but you thought they turned a corner, and again they've sort of flattered to deceive again. I mean, Monday scored 2 at the weekend, midweek, and didn't really contribute here. They started Cafu, he scored a nice goal. Depreville comes on and doesn't do much. They're still sort of stuck in sort of third gear at the moment, and you start to worry that Gourvenec's going to come under some real pressure in the near future. But another excellent game that I really enjoyed on Sunday, and I'll talk to you about it first, Adam, is the Lyon-Caen game. Really excellent game, to be fair, from two sides that are playing interesting football, at least. I mean, I've watched Caen a few times this season. They were a bit more offensive than they have been. But we'll start with Lyon, getting to winning ways again after that poor result against Lille. Again, this one was a bit more of a struggle. The last couple of weeks, it's been a little bit, well, in the last week or so, it's been a bit tougher for them at least. But this was an important win against a side that are seventh. So you can't deny that this was always going to be a tough game away from home as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting to see Con up in the top half. They've been up and down in the last couple of seasons. I remember the season Angers got promoted. It was 2 seasons ago when they also challenged at the top, and at one point they're in the top 3, and they're sort of having a similar season. The last season, then they sort of had their down period, and very nearly got relegated. And honestly, quite lucky to stay in division with that draw against PSG on the last day of the season. But yeah, they're another side who are quite sort of, as you said, interesting football. They're playing a little bit more expansive than some. And they're another side who've got these sort of in a similar multitude, John, and they've got some really exciting in terms, not necessarily that's for skill and flair, but they're very effective players like Bonnie Lordland, who is honestly quite skillful, like very effective going forward. Even Santini's a great striker to watch. He's very bulky, the classic sort of number 9 who can he's quite for Ligue 1 terms anyway, and for a mid-table side, he's relatively prolific, and he's very effective up front. And I've always quite liked Vincent Bassat. I think he was good at Nantes when he was there. Been a little bit injured this season, and Yusuf Benassa, who was at Nancy last season, he didn't really find too much space in that Nancy side to show out what he's capable of. But he's come into Caen this season and done well. So I think they're sort of things to be had for Caen this season. They've got some quietly effective players. Frederick Gilbert's another one at fullback, who I'm surprised Bordeaux let go. I know they've got Yusha Sabali there, but when Sabali can play both fullbacks and they haven't got the not isn't necessarily blessed at left back, with Perronard's come in and not necessarily the most, not he's young, he's got a long way to go in his career, but he's not perhaps to the standard Bordeaux would hope. And Milan Gajic, not necessarily, he's in a very similar position, and I'm surprised they let him go. So there are things for Caen to be had this season. It'd be really interesting to see where they finish. But yeah, it was great to see Lyon again playing some exciting football. They're arguably the best team to watch in the league this season. Probably not even arguably, probably quite definitively. But yeah, I hope that both sides continue to play the way they're playing, because again, they're both really exciting teams to watch.
Yeah, I just felt in this one as well, especially for Caen, they were really unlucky at times. I think they created some really decent transfers. I mean, Santini's a pain in the bum, and the best of times I really like that kind of striker. He's constantly harassing defenders with his strength. But I just felt in this one, watching Caen again, is that they may be 2 or 3 players off of being a really, really good side. I like the defence. I like Gico and De Silva. They're good centre-backs, and they've got good full-backs in Gilbert and Benguet, especially going forward as well. Benacer, I'll come back to him in a moment, but him, maybe Ferre is where they're struggling. I think he looks like he's lost a step now. If they had a couple of wingers to get something into Santini or support him better, one other side of Ronnie Rodeland, who is a really excellent player and can score goals. I mean, Kouakou was really poor in this one, and Ferre was as well. That just if they gave Santini more service, especially from a wider position, I think they could be a really good team. I mean, they're 7th at the moment, but they could be an unarguable 7th if they maybe had a couple more players of a bit of quality. But the player I do want to come back to is Benacer, who I really think was excellent this game. I think he was superb. He was maybe a little bit more attacking than I've seen him in the past. He more of a sort of number 8 role, but he was the dictator in this midfield. And I mean, against players like Aouar and Toussaint, who are good midfielders as well, he was the commander in this game. He sprayed the ball about. He was playing it wide. He was playing incisive passes. Everything seemed to be going forward. He was dictating the pace. He has that lovely bit of skill I'm sure everyone's seen through the videos where he nutmegs the player as well with a lovely bit of feet movement. I think he's an excellent player. I think now that he's starting more games for Caen, he for some reason Nancy didn't play him much last season. It could have been a number of things, but at 21, he looks like he's starting to find his rhythm again. I mean, there was a lot of hype of him coming from Nancy in Ligue 2 and going to Monaco, but I might be a bit of a shout, and I'm not guaranteeing this, but in the summer when Monaco get him back and have a look at him, they need to take a longer look at Benacer, I think. Him in the middle, possibly Fabinho stays, which is unlikely, but I'm just feel like he's possibly a better replacement for Tiémoué Bakayoko than what they have at the moment. He's a little bit more controlled. He's got excellent positioning when he is in a more defensive set, and he can dictate the pace, which is something they're missing at the moment in terms of João Moutinho maybe not quite being good enough defensively in that role. Yuri Tielemans as well, not quite deciding where he works. I thought he was excellent and he showed a lot. And Lyon were maybe a little bit lucky in this one for a number of things, especially Marcel pushing a linesman and getting no repercussion at all. He didn't even get a booking, which is one of the most unbelievable things I've seen this season. I think how he's got away with that, I will never know. So we'll go through any other sort of game. I mean, one I wanted to mention possibly was Metz have had an awful start to the season, really, and now they are 14 points away from 17th now, as they are bottom of the table. That's their escape route. I mean, they're 12 points off the relegation playoffs. It's going to, at this stage, even now, possibly take a monumental effort for them to get out of it, isn't it?
Yeah. I think they're down. It's a bit of a shame, but it's something we've sort of come back to a number of times on the podcast this season. In that selling Sheikh Diabate and Ismail Assar, obviously Diabate was on loan from Westmanless for, so they had to send him back. But it feels like he was available again, and there definitely were attempts made, and I don't know how that deal fell through. But Diabate is an experienced and proven league and goal scorer, and Metz conceded the most goals in the league last season, and they finished 14th, I think. It was very close at the bottom. And the goals of Sarr and Diabate kept them up. I mean, Sarr's fair enough. they've got a decent fee for him, and he's a player that is obviously going to be playing at a high level. But it felt like that. Mathieu de Seve's come in and I think done really, really well in a difficult situation. He's good for Stan Liège for quite a long time, and he would have been a decent enough replacement for Sarr. But they just don't have a focal point, and they don't have anybody that they can rely on to score them goals. And Diabate, you can rely on him to score goals in Ligue. He's very that classic beanpole striker, but he's effective. And replacing him with a combination of Nolan Roux, who's notoriously ineffective and lacks so much composure. He's the least amount of composure of any striker I've ever seen. And to the point where it looks like he's happy playing on the wing because he doesn't have to have any responsibility of scoring goals. And Emmanuel, it's probably a bit harsh, but still, Emmanuel Riviere is another player that isn't necessarily a player you can rely on to score goals. And I feel like that's a huge, huge miss for them. And I just can't see a way out. I mean, when the Prats took over at Toulouse, they were 10 points adrift with 10 games to play. And that, at that point, felt like a bit of a miracle. I know that there are more games to play, but Toulouse had a decent enough team. Mets don't have they've got a Ligue 2 team with a couple of good players in, like Coad and De Sevi. And the 14-point gap is just obscene. They've only scored 6 goals in those 16 games, and I don't see a way out. I think they're done, aren't they? They must be.
They have to be cooked. I mean, if you're looking at any of the games at the moment, a game against Nice is something you maybe want to try and aim and take a point from. And in the end, they were sort of overwhelmed. I mean, Balotelli scored a lucky free kick and set up a nice goal, really, for Nice. But they are struggling at the moment, really. Still, even though they have lifted to 13th, but Mets are down. I mean, look at the stats. I mean, they've got minus 26 goal difference. They have the worst defense in the league. They have by far the worst attack in the league. I mean, they've scored 5 less than the next worst, which is Caen. Ironically, even though they're 7th, and then the next worst conceders are on 27, which is both Strasbourg and Dijon. I mean, that's absurd. That amount of difference is impossible. I mean, 1 win and 1 draw a season, and they've barely gained anything under Frederic Hans. They got rid of Hinchberger hoping that it might inspire something. It hasn't. It has not at all. And it's only really going to get worse for them, I think. I mean, if you're aiming for anything, their next game's against Rennes, who are in form, Montpellier, who are in form, Strasbourg, who are in form. I think what the only hope they have is in January, try and do something. I mean, I don't know what they can do, but they're going to have to try and muster something together, trying to get out of this. Just quickly before we mention, we'll move on to international duties. Adam, is there anything else you want to pick out from this Ligue 1 weekend to mention to the audience? I mean, it was a really good weekend, and there's a few games to pick from. Is there anything else I feel the need to speak about?
I thought it was. I watched my choice for the multiplex was the Monaco Angers game, which turned out to be a terrible choice. To be honest, it was a very poor game, and Falcao scored the only goal. It was pretty much the first sort of anything that happened in the game after 2 minutes. And I'm worried about Angers. I think 14 points after 16 games. They're missing Sheikh Ndoye, and they could be in trouble. I don't think Moulin, the manager's in trouble, but they're lacking the sort of the bite and the power that Sheikh Ndoye provides, and I don't know how they can replace that when Mangani's not at his best form, which he hasn't been in the last few weeks. One of my favourite players in the league, but he's been a bit off colour recently. When he's good, I think he can cover those gaps. But they can't rely on him to do that all the time, so that's a bit disappointing. I think it's interesting to mention what you mentioned in the roundup, the Ranieri situation with Nantes. There was against Saint-Etienne. He brought Valentin Rongier off at half time after quite a forceful challenge, which I don't think he even received it. We've even given as a foul. And there's this brilliant video, which is actually on the Nantes Twitter feed. Like they tweeted it themselves, of Ranieri sort of giving the referee a telling off, basically, in not in like an aggressive, I'm upset because you didn't do the right, you didn't give send a player after fouling one of my players, in like a sort of almost like a fatherly way. He was just disappointed. He wasn't angry. He was disappointed, and so he sort of calls Ranieri. He calls Rongier over, and Rongier is looking very sort of sheepish, and he points at his ankle, which is cut, and he says, this is a red card, and he sort of storms off, and then you see him talking to the referee, and one of the Snettien co-presidents there, not Rochetu, the Romier, is it? I think, and he's sort of discussing it. He's sort of saying to the ref, like, if it's not an issue if we lose the game, that's not an issue, but if I have to bring Rongier off because he's broken his ankle, that is an issue. And the rest sort of nod. He was quite a young referee, sort of nods along. It was just sort of a great sort of, Ranieri showing his experience and the gravitas that he has. And it was, although Rongier does actually genuinely look injured, it was quite sort of an interesting side note to the way sort of affected Ligue 1. And I think it's great that he's manager of Nantes. It's been good fun so far.
Yeah, and you mentioned it rightly. It seemed like he was sort of, nothing was really angry per se about it, other than he wants to protect his players, which is a really nice thing to see. But that game as well, it had the weirdest contrast I think I've ever seen. I mean, Vincent Pajot's goal is absolutely wonderful. It seems to consistently rise. I mean, Tatarusanu watches it and goes, I can maybe go for that. And then it lifts as it's getting closer and he goes, oh, no, there's no way I'm going to even try for that. And it goes right into I've not seen a goal for a long while that's gone absolutely bang into that top corner. It's a really wonderful strike from distance that you really don't expect from Pajot at times, at least anyway. And then, a high contrast to their season, at least anyway, of being a spectacular moment is what has been a pretty woeful moment. And then Nantes, who've had a good season, have the scrappiest goal you can possibly think of. I mean, Emiliano Sano isn't graceful at the best of times, really, but he bundles between two defenders. He sort of controls it in his nether regions, really, in the end, and then it's cleared from the defender, Lacroix, into his face, and it goes in. It is wonderfully comic in some ways, and almost the perfect amalgamation of the Argentinian, really, and how he tends to score goals. But a wonderful little game that. Again, two sides that aren't quite at probably a European level at the moment, but they're still waiting for that first win under Julien Sablé Arlay there. But let's move on to France's World Cup group now. That was drawn on Friday evening, as I'm sure many of you tuned in. And it's an interesting one. Group C, they're facing Denmark, who are a decent side. We've seen that then put Ireland to the sword in the playoffs. Peru, who got past New Zealand, and Australia, who beat Syria in their qualifiers as well. That isn't looking at some of the other groups, especially, they have to be really happy with what they drew there, don't they?
Yeah, I definitely think that's the case. You'd expect France to win the group pretty comfortably, sort of. And anything, it's one of those groups where anything less is almost, a little bit of a disappointment. And they seem to remember the group in perhaps 2006 that had South Korea, Switzerland, and Togo in, and it's a similar sort of group in that they kind of made a hash of that group as well. They think they drew with Switzerland and South Korea, and perhaps finished second in that group to Switzerland. I seem to remember. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure they finished second in that group, and they made hard work of it. And I feel like this is the case with some of the bigger teams or some of the, perceived as bigger teams, England being another one, although not necessarily the case in terms of results, that a slightly more difficult group is almost beneficial because it means they have to hit the ground running, and it means that they can't, ease into the tournament. They're forced to play with intensity. They're forced to win the earlier games because they know that the later games are going to be more difficult. And France are a classic team that are susceptible to complacency. And I feel like this is the only real issue with this group, because on paper it does look very, very winnable, is that they might get a little bit complacent perhaps.
I mean, yeah, this is a group they should win. I mean, they're facing Australia first, and then they face Peru. So they've got the two easy games, you would say, initially, and then they have to face Denmark in the final one. I think the only thing that's going to really maybe slow them down, and it's an issue probably for a number of teams really in this tournament, is the sheer distance you're going to have to go between games. I mean, they're probably more favourable than some. They've got their opening game in Kazan, then they're in Yekaterinburg, sorry, let's say that right. It's going to be tough for some of these, at least anyway. Thank God that they've got their third game in Moscow. That's a lot easier to say. That's not too bad, but you look at the distances between St. Petersburg, the aforementioned Yekaterinburg as well and Sochi as well. There's thousands of miles between those sort of stadiums. If you're a little bit unlucky and you get something a bit difficult, I mean, I'm just trying to look at the games that they might face should they win the group, and they're back in Kazan. Then they might be in Novgorod, and that's another fair distance away. That's maybe going to be a possible sort of issue that they've tried to sort of skirt around at least anyway. But I do want to mention if they do, for example, win the group, they would face the runners-up of Group D, which is Argentina's group, which isn't a particularly tricky one either, looking at the teams like Croatia are a decent side, Iceland and Nigeria. They could also then, on the other side of it for the quarterfinals as well, might be either the winners of Group A or Group B. That could be someone like Portugal or Spain, which is probably their first, you might even say tough opponent, because if it ends up being the winner of Group A, it could be Russia, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, or Uruguay, and that's not quite the difficulty level you have to admit. So, in all honesty, I know some people are already picking France as possible favourites anyway, but they have a relatively easy kind of route to a semi-final if things go their way.
Yeah, I think again that'd be interesting to see whether that is something that plays into their hands or not, because obviously you'd expect them to beat those teams mentioned, and you expect them to find their way to the semi-finals. But I think the thing with at this point is that this is the kind of thing that we always do before a major tournament. You kind of look at that route, and it could easily pan out like that. But then the things that sort of happen in major tournaments are very difficult to they're very sort of unsolicited sometimes. You talk about France have been on the wrong end of some, Senegal game in 2002, and things go awry, and they could easily, Croatia could possibly win Group D, and they could find themselves playing Argentina in the second round and already be in trouble. So it is nice to have that sort of route ahead of them. The path ahead of them seems to have sort of cleared relatively nicely, but I think there's hopefully anyway they won't be sort of taking that too much for granted just yet, because they could easily sort of fall into an Argentine second round game or perhaps something even worse going on. So it's definitely a really, really good it's a good group. They would have hoped for that sort of draw, but I don't think they should take it too lightly. We've seen how good Denmark are as well. They could also beat those first two opponents, and then that final group game between Denmark and France in Moscow on Tuesday, June 26th, could be quite the decider, and who it'd be difficult to back against Denmark causing them some trouble there. So there's a lot. I think there's a lot to unfold just yet, but a good group.
Yeah, and when you think about the players that they have got, like Christian Eriksen and the skipping my name out, but it's the Feyenoord striker as well. I'm a big fan of him. Jorgensen, that's it.
Oh yeah.
He's a really good player as well. They've got some Larage, obviously, of Bordeaux. They're only a French contingent. There's a couple of it. Pione Sisto I like a lot at Celta Vigo as well. Kasper Schmeichel obviously in goal. They've got, or possibly Jonas Lössl for a gang-up goalkeeper, depending on which way they go. I think they might go for the former in that one. But they've got some interesting players. They're not going to be the easiest side to play. But if things start going their way, I'm just looking at a possible quarterfinal with Portugal. That should be fun if it's a repeat of the 2016 European Championship final, a possibility for potential revenge there. That has to be in their sightline. That would be a nice one to pick up. And there's a few interesting games on the side there as well. But we're getting some draws now, at least. Anyway, there'll be the Champions League draw soon as well with Paris Saint-Germain in there. And the only real one in Europe, at least this week, that's maybe got a bit of trouble is Marseille. I mean, Nice are already through, as are Monaco are already eliminated from the Champions League, and Lyon are already through in the Europa League as well. Do you still expect Marseille to pass the test of Red Bull Salzburg? It's a tough one, but with the Austrians already qualified, it's a good chance, isn't it?
It is a really good chance. Yeah, I think Marseille have been terrible in the Europa League. I kind of feel like, at least I'm under the impression that they see it as at least sort of not necessarily more important than the cups, but I think there is importance on this competition. Perhaps that they want to get to. They see themselves as a European regular. They see themselves as a big club, which they are, and they expect to be sort of pushing quarter-final level, given the squad that they've got and the investment they've made in some big names and still very good players. And Luis Gustavo has been brilliant, Payet, Rami, those sort of players. So, but they seem to really have taken it, at least in playing terms, have been very, very lackluster. And they've been very lucky to find themselves in the position that they are. In that Salzburg have already qualified, beat them, of course, in Austria. And they sort of happened into this situation where they're playing against a team who have nothing to play for at home, and they've won both their home games so far, Marseille, and that they sort of got that last minute, very, very fluky goal in the previous game away at Konyaspor, and they sort of come into this situation where they could, it's sort of laid out for them to qualify, but they've come so close to messing it up so far. It feels like there's still a few potholes on this road just yet. And I think the thing to say about Salzburg is that Austrian clubs' budgets are very small, and the prize money on offer in the Europa League, I know perhaps less so for Salzburg, but it is a factor. Austria Vienna are another one, that they really take these games very seriously, because even though it might be a dead rubber in terms of the group, there's still prize money to be had, and there's still benefits there for them. So I don't know that Salzburg will just roll over. And coming to the Velodrome, it's a magnificent stadium. It won't be full, but it's a big opportunity. And for some of those players, not to belittle Salzburg, they're a very, very good team, and their youth players, the young players, are very good. They won the UEFA Youth League last year, so they've got a lot of talent. But coming to the Velodrome might be one of the biggest games and one of the biggest stages that some of those players have ever played on. So I think there's a number of caveats to that sort of Marseille. On paper, they could stroll through and it could be very simple, but there's still some work to be done just yet, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be a really interesting one when it does come round to Thursday. That, unfortunately, is the only one that's going to have some excitement, really, for a French side, but we'll wait and see how that goes on. That's all we have for this week. My thanks to Adam, and for all of you listening at home. There'll be no preview show on Thursday, so do join us again for the main show back on Monday at the same time and same place next week. A bientôt and goodbye.